Welcome. Welcome to tonight's discussion of Activized, presented by Meaningful Movies Sustainable Ballard. Thank you all for joining us tonight. I'm Donna Lynn, the project lead for Meaningful Movies Sustainable Ballard. Also joining tonight is Max Rennie, who will be taking care of the technical part of this meeting. So please send him a private chat if you have any technical problems. Here is our agenda for tonight. We will start with a brief intro about Sustainable Ballard, then producer Marga Varela will share her screen and the film with us. The film is 36 minutes long, after which Jenny Hines from Sustainable Ballard will do a brief interview with the director-producer, Eric Stange, that leaves us about 45 minutes to discuss the film with all of you. Before we get going, we want to give you all a quick orientation to Zoom. Sorry, this keeps doing away. You should see a similar menu bar at the bottom of your screen in this slide. We will mute and turn off screen share for all of you during the film and the interview with the director. You can use the reactions and the chat button to comment, ask questions, or just show enthusiasm with reactions. After that, we will unmute you and turn on screen share for the discussion. But please keep yourselves muted except to speak. You can again use the chat button to comment on what others are saying during our discussion. You can send Max a private chat if you are having any technical issues. Finally, on the lower right, you can leave the meeting whenever you like. At the top right of the screen, you will see some options for viewing. I recommend you choose the gallery view once we start the discussion. On behalf of Meaningful Movies, I'd like to let you know that there are a number of virtual film viewings and discussions online. For information about other Meaningful Movie events, visit the Meaningful Movies website. On behalf of Sustainable Ballard, first of all, thanks so much to all of you who donated, and thanks to our filmmakers for offering this screening for free so that all of your donations tonight can go directly to the movement for Black Lives. Sustainable Ballard has more meaningful movies coming up during our Festival from July through November. Each month has a theme and includes a meaningful movie, a challenge, and an online game or contest. Visit fest.sustainableballard.org to see our schedule of activities, or meaningfulmovies.org to get the final details on the movies. Now I'd like to invite Marga Varela to start the film.
Okay. A second.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us tonight. That was a great film. I hope you all enjoyed it. Thanks for the comment, Jennifer. So I'm the executive director of Sustainable Ballard, and we're looking forward to meeting you all in a moment. But first, I'm really pleased to introduce Marga Varela, who's one of the producers of the film, and also Eric Stange, who's also the director and a producer. Can we unmute Eric? Or I guess you have to do it yourself, Eric.
Oh, there I am. Hi, everybody. Thank you for watching. It's great to see you all. I'm happy to talk about the film, answer questions, anything you'd like to talk about.
Yeah, so we have a few questions for you, Eric. And if anyone else has any questions, if you can put those in the chat, and I'll check in with Max after I ask our first questions to see if there are some more. Or if you have questions for Marga as well. So Eric's an award-winning independent documentary film producer, director, and writer who specializes in current affairs as well as cultural and social history. So thanks for joining us. My first question for you is, what motivated you to take on this project?
That's a good question. It actually wasn't my idea. It was the idea of a retired high school history teacher who lives near me outside Boston. And she's not a filmmaker, but she wanted to make a film about Trump, about a film that never mentions Trump, where you never hear Trump, you never see Trump, but that was nonetheless about Trump and the response to Trump. And so in conversations, after a lot of back and forth, we came up with this idea of doing stories about people who became activists almost despite themselves, who became activists somehow because of things that had happened during the Trump administration. And we thought that was a really interesting way to look at what people are doing, how people are responding, and at the same time tell this bigger story about activism in general and about the role of activism in American life, and but do it through the stories of these people who were newly minted activists.
That's interesting that their motivations came from outside the same way yours did.
Mm-hmm.
And how did you find the activists, and why did you choose them?
Well, once we decided on this idea of the newly minted activists, we had to narrow it down to the issue areas, and we picked these three areas of immigration rights, gun violence prevention, and voting rights, because things were very active. This was the fall of 2018 when we were doing this. Things were very active in all those areas at the time. And so we started calling organizations that are active in those areas and really just asking, do you know of somebody who didn't used to do this, who's never done this before, but who's thrown themselves into it with both feet? And so that's how it works. You start getting names and you call people who call people, and it had to be done very quickly because we only had a short window of time to film in. And so we had to kind of track people down and then rush off and film with them. And we also needed people who were doing things. I mean, there are, of course, many, many activists who are active out on the streets at one particular time, but not most of the time. And we needed people who were going to be doing something in our window, which was the fall of 2018. And so that also helped narrow the focus, and we had to find those particular people.
Can you give us an update on what those activists have done since the film?
Yeah, actually, Marga, do you mind? Because you've been in touch with some of them more recently than I have.
Yes, we're in touch with them throughout, these screenings. And let's see, I'll try to mention a few of them that I'm in touch with frequently. So, for example, Daphne Frias, the young woman in New York in a wheelchair, she continues leading the March for Our Lives chapter in New York, but she's also doing a lot of climate activism. So she has moved on to organizing some climate rallies, and also trying to advocate to include people with disabilities into activism, both for gun violence and climate change. So that has been her focus. Vickiana, the other young woman in the film, who's here in Boston, she has been organizing lots of Black Lives Matter rallies lately. She's been all over the newspapers here in the Boston area, because she's been the main organizer of most of the Boston marches in the past few weeks. Gerald Givens, the gentleman in North Carolina at the NAACP, he's also very involved with Black Lives Matter rallies down in North Carolina right now. Let's see. Same thing for Joaquin Oliver, Manuel Oliver, the dad of Joaquin Oliver. The majority of them have turned their attention to racial injustice and the movement that is right now galvanizing really the activism efforts in the country.
Yeah, one of the things we're doing is we plan to do a little update for the film, a kind of what are they doing now epilogue. And it's kind of a moving target. I mean, especially with what's happened in the last few weeks. So we're going to do that. We're not quite sure when, or we don't want it to feel old already by the fall. So we may have to do 2 updates. I don't know. See, people are, almost everybody in the film is very active right now.
Oh, we forgot to mention Elizabeth, the woman in Texas at the bus station. So those were the first days or weeks of her activism with the group, and but now, a year later, she's one of the main leaders of Angry Tias and Abuelas, and they are fighting in Matamoros with the encampments down there. At so many levels, they're fighting to protect the refugees and immigrants there from being infected with the coronavirus, as they are, in very unsanitary conditions. They're fighting for asylum seekers, and she's basically crossing back and forth from Mexico and living down there 24/7 now. So yeah, she's really completely dedicated to that activism right now.
Cool. So what, do you have any plans for any next films beyond this, Eric?
Well, I had a plan for one I was going to be doing this summer about a part of an initiative within the Democratic Party that's actually a brand new idea. The Democratic Party, some young people who know party insiders, proposed a plan to hire 1,000 young people in their early 20s in battleground states around the country, mostly in cities, and to train them. And they started to do this a year and a half ago, really. So the idea was to have 1,000 people who were trained political organizers and who would be paid, and have them ready to hit the ground running the moment the final Democratic candidate emerged. Of course, the way things played out, their plan had to adapt to different realities. They really thought that it was going to be a contested convention this year. Everybody did think that until suddenly it wasn't. So they were planning to have all these people standing by to go to work in July or end of June. But in fact, it became clear that Biden was the candidate. And then of course they had to switch everything over to virtual training. So fortunately, the initiative is called Organizing Core 2020. And you can look it up on the web, oc2020.org. And it's been very successful. And I think they've now got 1,000 trainees. And it sounds so obvious, but it's actually brand new for the Democrats, and I don't think the Republicans have done anything like it either. And that is to have young people who are from the communities in which they're going to be working and who are really just in the battleground states. And it all goes back to the fact that Hillary Clinton lost because of a ridiculously small number of votes in 3 states. It was about 75,000 votes overall that cost her the election. It's crazy.
Yeah.
And so the Democrats are trying to make sure that doesn't happen again. And the whole reason that happened was they just didn't get out the vote. They didn't do the door knocking and the phone calling and the on the streets work that has to happen. And so this is all about having young people who are trained to do that, know what they're doing, not just volunteers, but actually paid. And so I thought it would be a great film to follow some of the recruits through their training and then follow them into the streets as they do this. But it's all happening online, which does not make for a very exciting film.
Yeah.
So I put that on hold for the moment.
All right. Do we have any questions from our audience? Does anyone put anything in the chat? Max? Oh.
Yeah, I can't see anything in the chat. I think people should be able to unmute themselves now, I think. So if you would like to ask a question, feel free to unmute yourself in the left corner.
Or the easiest or the best way to do it is to actually put your finger down on the space bar while you're talking and then let it off, and then you're muted again.
There you go.
Can I ask what Sustainable Ballard is and what you do? And
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
So we're a neighborhood organization. That's what Ballard is. It's a neighborhood in Seattle, and we basically started after the Iraq War, protests in 2003 or 2000-ish, to instead of just protesting about what's bad, we decided to try and help people figure out what's good about sustainability, focus on a positive future. So our projects have all developed from community members where we support them with publicizing those ideas to begin with and rallying people around sustainability ideas. And then as we got bigger, we can now provide some financial support for those projects as well. So we have had a range of anywhere from 8 to 20 projects going at a time. We have about 14 going right now, all the way from like Sustainable Ballard knitters for the homeless to like what are our big, well, this Meaningful Movies is one of our projects.
Which is great, by the way. I love that.
Yeah. So yeah, you can find out about all of our projects at sustainableballard.org. And then we have normally a yearly live festival in September where we showcase our projects and invite the sustainable community to be there and do educational and fun activities. But this year it's become an unfestival, so it's going to be virtual events, but all the way from now until November we'll have contests and movies and workshops going on, and we've got a theme for each month for the Unfestival. So, Andrea is on here somewhere, and she's actually our president.
Oh, there is a question.
There is a question, yeah.
Oh. Anyway, maybe she left, but Andrea Fasti is our president, and she was on here watching the film too. So I was going to ask her to say something, but I guess she's gone.
Yeah, there's a question from Barb.
Yeah.
Do you want us to read it?
So Barb says, what do you think we can do to encourage people to become activists or continue to work for change? I think that must be work for change.
Well, I'm hoping this film helps in a small way. I mean, that's sort of my gesture toward that is we're trying to get, and Marga is very, very involved in this. We're trying to get the film out to as many small groups like you as possible. Partly because it's not a film that it's going to be a big feature documentary. It may end up on television at some point, but mainly we're just trying to get groups to use it and have a kind of small scale but broad outreach to send the message that really anyone can become an activist. And that's why we're trying to show in the film, young people, old people, different backgrounds, but people are moved to action by all sorts of different things. And you don't have to be trained, you don't have to be born into it, you don't have to have some special gift, that anyone can do it. So.
And storytelling works. Storytelling really, really works. It can change people in the matter of an hour and a half. I've seen people turn vegetarian for years after watching a documentary. I've seen people stop using plastic bags after watching a documentary. I've watched people say, hey, I can be an activist too. If they can, I can too. So I don't know, but there's some kind of magical process when you see someone and you see yourself on the screen that really can very fast change people's thinking. It doesn't mean that everybody changes their mind or their habits after watching a documentary, but I really think it helps if the person is already thinking or worried about those issues, and then they're presented to the person in a way that inspire the person and move the person. It's very effective. It's a great way. Also, it's an honest way to do it. It's just opening a window to the world and showing it. It's not a commercial. It's not indoctrinating someone. It's just telling a story, and everybody likes stories.
Yeah. I'm kind of an accidental activist myself. I stumbled across Sustainable Ballard having a fair at the very beginning when it first started, and I was just interested in helping out and never imagined that I would take any sort of leadership position. But the more passionate I got about it by working with other people, just sort of grew into an occupation now.
Yeah, I mean, that's a story we heard from several people in the film. They never, first of all, they were surprised to find themselves doing anything. And now they're totally surprised to find themselves in leadership positions. But that's what happens.
Yeah.
There's a question about, did working on the film inspire you to become more of an activist? Or those who know you? If not, why not? Please share. I mean, Marga, do you want to go first?
Well, I have to be completely honest. I don't know if the definition of activist is good for me. I'm not an activist in the way that you see in the film or that most people understand. I like to be behind scenes. Maybe that's why I work in impact production with films. I don't like to be front in any way. So, but perhaps this is a way of activism. In a way, is potentially a way to change the world too.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I would say. I'm not out there on the front lines, but I am taking my camera and camera crew places and trying to portray things and tell stories and move people to action. So that is indeed my form of activism.
Well, let's thanks both of you for answering those questions. Let's get to know our audience here a little bit. I assume you two are able to stay with us for the discussion. I know it's late in your part of the world.
Yeah, no, that's all right.
Okay, let me just share my screen here. And anyone out there who wants to turn on your screen sharing so we can see you, that would be great. Like Max said, you should be able to unmute yourself or press the space button now when you want to talk. I'm going to pull up the discussion questions we came up with for folks. So, and I'm going to just try and invite people to, in the order that you appear on my screen, if I can do that. So the first is just introductions, your name, where you live, and which activist or which story in the film inspired you. Let's start with Kay Louise.
Where is it? I'm just interested to, oh, wait a minute. Is that muting or unmuting?
We can hear you.
You are unmutable. All right. No, I'm just interested to hear everything. I'm from Meaningful Movies, and I've been going there for years, and I don't drive anymore. I mean, I haven't driven for a year, and I'm just not able to do a lot actively, but I sign petitions, and I just talk to my friends, and I post things on Facebook, etc., etc. But
Are you in Seattle?
Yes. Oh, sorry, I didn't say that. All right. Yes. Well,
You said Meaningful Movies, so I assumed, but
yeah. Well, that's it. Well, where it started in with Rick and Diane, and Diane's still here, of course, and so that's when I've been connected since. Anyway, over there, and I go to the Wedgwood one sometime too, but I used to.
was there a story from the movie that inspired you?
Well, I just thought the young woman in the wheelchair was pretty amazing to be out there like that. I mean, and I just think this people not being able to vote, that really gets me. I mean, that's terrible when people can't register to vote, then they think they've voted, they've had a provisional ballot or something, and then they find out later that didn't count or didn't work and this business of vote by mail, we can do that in Seattle. We're doing that for years anyway. So I don't know why it's taken everybody else so long to do that. Now we're in this COVID thing. It's necessary, right? But
Yeah.
still signing all those petitions, but I don't know how much it helps anybody else. But
All right. Linda, can you unmute yourself? Yes.
Sure. Thanks. Yeah, I just, yeah, all of them were inspiring. It'd be hard to pick one. I think, people that give up so much of their lives to, help other people. I mean, that's just such a beautiful gift. And I think right now with all that's going on, it's great to see people in the streets for social justice. I mean, I don't want anybody to get sick. I don't want people to get hurt, but I think our Americans haven't been in the streets and we need to be. There's been so much injustice in our world that we've just sat at home and not done anything about. So, yeah.
Thank you. I'm going to stop the share so we can all see each other better. How about Kevin?
Hey there, can you hear me?
Yes.
Good. Well, I live in Fremont.
And
something that got me thinking about abuses. What about this ballot harvesting where they go homeless people and stuff like that, pay them money, and then the harvesters fill out the ballots? Does the speaker know about that in California and who's behind it?
I think that's for you, Eric, a question for you.
Oh, is that for me? No, I know nothing about it. It sounds like yet another dirty trick that I have to say, when you hear about these things, it's almost always Republicans doing it. It's
Well,
not
I heard
that
it was.
Democrats haven't ever done it, but most of the ones you hear about are Republicans.
Well, I heard actually it was a Democratic thing. That's why they're so behind the mail-in ballots.
I haven't heard anything about, what did you call vote harvesting, ballot harvesting?
Ballot harvesting. The idea is that they collect all these things like a harvest, and these poor souls don't know anything about. They can't even live their own lives, and then they get paid, and then the votes, just like the old Chicago days, you know, abuses on both parties like that. And I don't like it.
Mm.
No, of course not. Anything that interferes with a free and fair election is a problem. Honestly, though, I haven't heard anything about that. The last time I heard anything like that was the North Carolina case, where it was the Republican candidate who was rigging the absentee ballots.
Didn't Gerald say in the film that it's more likely to get hit by lightning in North Carolina than to be caught into a voting fraud that is almost impossible to commit voting fraud?
Yeah, the incidence of voting fraud nationally is minute. It statistically barely registers. I mean, it's just too
here in the
much
state of Washington, we had a governor's election that took 3 times, and they kept finding ballots all over the place, you know, so. And I think that's in other places too, you know, I don't know what's going on with that kind of thing. I think it all becoming.
No question there's inefficiency, because we, as a society, we decide not to fund our elections very well. So it depends on volunteers, and a lot of the technology is outdated and this and that, but that's different from deliberate fraud.
Right.
So it looks like Jennifer is next and might have something to say about that.
Sure. Well, just about the role of an activist, just briefly my own thing. I was a public school teacher until 10 years ago, and then I retired, but I became a substitute teacher. So my identity, you know, if you had talked to me about who I am, the first thing I would have mentioned is I'm a math teacher. And then one day, probably a year and a half ago or so, I was able to buy this shirt that says all those things like Black Lives Matter, women need the vote, clean water, blah, blah, blah. And I wore it to school one day, to a group, a classroom where I had taught before. And so I gave the kids the assignment. And then I said, oh, but hold on. Before you start, I want to say something to you. And I stood up and I said, you know, I've been here numerous times. You think you know me. I think I know you. But the truth of the matter is that I want to tell you something about myself that you may not know. And I said, I'm an activist. Because there I had my shirt on. I proudly say, I'm an activist, you know, because I realized that is my identity now. Yeah, sure, I teach school to make money. But the most important thing now is making a difference in the world as an activist. So one of the things that I do a lot of is text banking. So texting to people in Georgia and Florida and all that to get the vote by mail thing started, because I honestly think that's going to make a huge difference in our election in November, is having people be able to vote by mail, especially when you got, 700,000 people going to one polling location in Georgia or something. That's ludicrous. That just ludicrous. So yeah, that's my journey.
And where are you located, Jennifer?
Spokane, Washington.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, our next stop.
Yeah?
Yep.
Oh, the next time you show the film? Great.
Our MMP. Yep.
Okay, how about Barb? Can't hear you.
My name's Barb, and I'm from Spokane, and I'm the one that's organizing the call, the next one in July. So,
Hi, Barb.
hi, nice to see you. And I think the one that spoke to me the most was the immigration one, just because I felt that way about the kids when I heard them, and I didn't know what to do. And so I just, so value people that are able to just put their life on hold and go take care of something, which my little small way to help is I'm learning Spanish so that I can feel like that normalizes the world in Spokane. If somebody speaks Spanish, I can just speak back to them and not have to, make them work harder. But that's nothing like, putting your life on hold and going and learning a whole new way of practicing law. And so I just give people that can commit that much, so much credit. And so I always makes me feel good to know that there are people in the world that are able to do that. So I really liked, they were all great stories. I really appreciate the way that you worked in the gun violence issue, because I think that's so divisive in our society right now. And I thought it was well kind of put into the story, so it's like not the first thing you see, and how those kids addressed all of gun violence, not just the shooting. And I think that was really well portrayed, and it's really exciting to see young people engaged. And mostly I'm watching tonight so I can get some ideas of how to get people engaged. And we have a pretty active March for Our Lives group in Spokane, so I'm definitely going to invite them to our screening, just because I think it's good for them to see too that other people are engaged. And so I appreciate it. I thought it was a great movie. Thanks.
Donna.
Thank you.
Thank you.
For Ballard. And yeah, it was really a great film. So thank you both very much. I enjoyed it. I think it's great training the young people in the battleground states and sending them out. They can have a big influence. When they had the 105 people and they all fell to the ground and said, this is how many people will die, I thought that was really graphic and memorable to see that. And the part where you talked about people needing photo ID to vote, and most Americans don't have that ID. I didn't really know that, so that was something new for me.
Well, she said most Americans do have a photo ID, but not 100%.
Oh, okay.
So I think that was her point, was that
they do, but they don't have that kind that they need.
Well, no, they have it. It's just that not everyone has it, and for some people, it's very hard to get. And so, what she's saying is that, 95% of people don't have any problem with getting a photo ID, but for 5% of people, it is a problem for various reasons. And we're a democracy for 100% of the people, not 95%.
It seems like there are so many issues around the voting and the gerrymandering.
Exactly, yeah.
And, we often don't even have the information. So,
Right.
it's hard to know how to tackle it really sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, the photo ID thing is interesting because I think a lot of people feel like, well, how hard can it be to show a photo ID? I mean, honestly, I wouldn't mind showing a photo ID when I show up to vote. It wouldn't bother me any. But it is this idea that for a certain number of people, elderly people, people who don't have access to cars, who live out in the country, who've lost their birth certificates, who, they're particularly poor people and people of color in rural areas, especially, getting one of these government sanctioned photo IDs can be really, really hard. And so it's just another thing that limits a certain kind of person from voting. And that's what all these laws are. They, they're not aimed at people like all of us. They're aimed at other people. And it just, it's really.
Yeah, I know about the ballot harvesting. That's something I'm going to look into a little bit more. So that was new.
Yeah, I hadn't heard of that.
So, yeah.
Donna. Max, do you want to go?
So I'm Max. I live in Seattle, and the activist I guess there was one line that really stood out to me, and I think it was the lady who was really lobbying for voting rights. And she said, once I saw the issue, it was really hard to unsee. I think that was a big thing that I've kind of come across. You kind of see it and it's like, oh man, like I kind of can't look the other way. So I think that's a big part of, I guess, being an activist is sometimes it's like, I just can't not stand up for this. So I thought it was a really good film though. It was great. Thank you.
Thank you.
There's a line in one of my favorite shows where some people are, well, they say that the character says, once you see the problem, you have a choice. And the other guy responds, I don't believe you do. Once you understand what's going on. So, all right, I'm going to pull up these questions again. So, have you had the experience of speaking out about something you believe in? What was that like for you? And what was it that inspired you to speak out? I'm not going to call on you guys now. I'll just let you jump in. So we're talking about your experience of speaking out about something and what that was like for you. And I'm going to hide that again so we can see each other. Remember that you have to unmute yourself before you talk. Does anyone want to? I know, Jennifer, you kind of talked about that already a little bit.
Yeah, I taught at a Palestinian university for a couple of years. And then when I came back here, I was teaching at the community college. So obviously it was a pretty intense experience, very positive in many ways, but I knew a lot that wasn't in the news, let's just put it that way. So I did speak out quite a bit. I spoke out at the college and we had Q&As with the students. And so that felt really good to be able to convey things that I'd experienced. And they were very interested in finding out what was going on.
Did you have any fear about that?
No.
No.
How did your students welcome this, this information that they weren't getting from anywhere else?
Yes, they did, and they had questions. And when I came back, there was a time when the Israelis were going around and they were taking like all the under 15-year-old males out of the house, and there was a family that I knew and their children had been taken, and I was really upset about it. So I went to one of my colleagues, and just because he was very interested in the thing, and I was like, I am so upset, and I heard this, and they're people I know, and they're doing this, and he goes, come with me right now to my classroom. People need to hear this. So I just kind of followed behind him and went to his classroom. And it was like I was the class, so I really appreciated having that opportunity. And then we had a thing in the theater where there was a rabbi and a Palestinian that were actually good friends and had known each other a long time. And they did a little, little thing together where they were both talking. And then we had questions from the audience to ask them afterwards. So that was really good too. So yes, it was good for me, and they felt like it was good for them too. So.
Yeah.
So Ballard is like a 90% white community. I don't know if you guys knew that, filmmakers, but Sustainable Ballard has been organizing Black Lives Matter protest every Friday since the protests started, and had anywhere from 200 to 800 people show up. Seems to be primarily Ballard residents. But I've been going to the protests and just speaking up by holding a sign. And it's just, it's such a charge, like, because they're like we're standing at an intersection where there's just tons of cars honking and showing support, and it just like, it makes you not want to leave. Like, just to get that feeling that we're all on the same side, and there's so many more people who feel that way than, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know if Marga, whether you've seen this. Marga and I happen to live in the same suburb of Boston. It's right next to Cambridge, which is right next to Boston, so it's very much an inner suburb. But it's still very mostly white town, and we've had the same experience the last few weeks. The numbers of people, and a lot of them young people, but not all, at the main intersection in town. I guess, I don't know if it's just Friday afternoons, or Marga, maybe you know, it's just amazing.
It's almost every afternoon.
Yeah, that's what I thought, because I've seen it a bunch. And
they stand separated by 12 feet or more.
Yeah.
We're not that separated, but
a lot of people for a small town of 40,000, 45,000. And it's really, you know, the papers are saying this feels different. And a lot of commentators and observers or historians are saying this time feels different. And that there really is an awareness of institutional racism and police brutality and all the issues that is somehow rising to a level of attention that just hasn't happened before. So
I've had a fear that this could blow over the same way the Sandy Hook thing did, because how can you possibly look at those little first graders' pictures and realize that they're dead, and they were shot by somebody, and it's awful, and we got to do something about this gun violence thing, and okay, and then it went away. But one of the things that I've been very aware of for a long time is how we truly don't teach about systemic racism or Black history in school. We really just don't. And I think that's going to change as a result of this. I think this is, as far as the schools are concerned, we're going to learn more. I'm from Indiana originally, which is the hotbed of the Ku Klux Klan, and I had no idea when I was growing up about that. I mean, don't even mention it, you know. And so I think that's one of the most important things that we can do, is acknowledge as a country about our past and figure out how to make changes in the future. So hopefully that's what one of the really positive results is going to be of all this upset.
Well, we've committed to being on our corner every Friday until the downtown protests are over.
When I was teaching, I often used to show a film. It's called A Class Divided. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's quite old, but it's Jane Elliott was a teacher, and she did these kind of experiments with her students.
Watch it on YouTube. It's there.
It's on YouTube.
Tons of stuff about Jane is on YouTube.
Yeah.
Yeah.
At Iowa, she was in Iowa, right?
I think so, yeah. But I mean, it's still very relevant, I think. So.
Anyone else want to jump in about speaking out?
Can I ask Donna, where did you teach, Donna? Where?
Here?
No, when you were doing Palestine University, you said it?
Birzeit University in Ramallah.
Nice.
They described it on the internet before I went as an emerging cafe society. And actually it was, and that's part of what drew me there.
Well, one reason why Barb and I are involved with Meaningful Movies in the first place is because we are part of a group called UUJME, which is the UUs for Justice in the Middle East. And both of us had been to Palestine, and both of us are very concerned with the Palestinian issue. And so that's why we're even here at all in the first place, is because we started out with Palestine issues and then.
Yeah, and then, you know, it's almost hard to talk about it because like people just have no clue.
No clue.
So you have to do what you can.
And when you go there and you say, listen, what can I do? They say, well, bring our story back. Tell about us when you go back. Because the truth is, Americans don't know.
I also worked with the Red Crescent when I was there too, so I met a lot of international people that went there. There were little groups of medical people that would come for like a week at a time from many different countries, mostly different European countries, and you know, to help in the hospitals like in Gaza and that, but not Americans. You know, a few came on an individual basis, but there were no groups, medical groups of Americans went while I was there.
So the next question is discuss. Oh, go ahead.
Kevin has a story for you.
All right.
There were Black Lives protesters on the overpass on Aurora, and our building has a lot of people that work night and they sleep during the day. So I went over to them and said, you know, this is a neighborhood area, and this building specifically where I live in, there's a lot of day sleepers. I said to them that there's 2 other overpasses north of the one that we're at, and there's just trees around them, but they're directed to the cars. But they didn't listen to me, and they did it every day, you know, and I think we have to be more kinder and think about others in our protests, you know, because we're not alone in these things. We're not living by ourselves. And I was so disappointed. These were mothers that dragged their kids out there doing this. And they heard me explain the whole thing about, you know, there are people who's, you know, very upset about not being able to sleep because of honking, because of, you know, a point of view. So it's just a shame, I think, that we can't be more considerate of each other in situations like that.
Good point.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so discuss the role of activism in a healthy democracy. Think about historical examples of activists who contributed to social change. Who were they and how did they do their work? Anyone? Oh, I didn't pull that up so you could read it. I'll do that. Does anyone have any particular historical activists that come to mind that inspire you? Wants to share?
Well, I mean, I'll just say something, unless anyone else wants to jump in. But you know, what Kevin was just saying actually speaks to this very issue, I think, which is, you know, how do you protest, but do it in a way that isn't disruptive or isn't offensive or isn't impolite or isn't causing a problem for somebody. And I think, you know, in many ways, the whole idea of protest, the whole idea of activism is in part, now this isn't the aim or the goal, but I don't think it's going to be very effective if someone isn't getting pissed off. And, you know, sometimes that's innocent bystanders, but at least people then become aware of it. I'm not saying that everything should be disruptive, and I'm certainly not saying things should be violent. But I think when you read biographies of activists who really did make a difference, I mean, almost always there's a point at which they talk about having to make that decision that they're not going to be nice and polite anymore. That somehow that's not cutting it, and they're going to have to do something else.
Yeah, that is a piece of the puzzle, is how to disrupt the system.
Toes will have to be stepped on sometimes. And like, I'm not sure if you've seen the video, do not remember the lady's name now, but she went on for about 8 minutes, kind of riffing off of something that Trevor Noah had said about, you know, how the whole thing with some of the protesters who are actually causing damage to buildings and stuff like that. And then, of course, then people say, oh no, they shouldn't ought to do that. And why are they doing that? And that's really bad and all that. But one of the points that this lady was making that Trevor Noah had made was, you know, there's been a social contract somehow or other among all of us that one of the things that we're not going to do is, I mean, one of the things we are going to do is respect property, everybody's property. But in the social contract, it's like, I'm going to do my part and you're going to do your part, and you know, society's going to be better for it. And what this lady was saying, and what Trevor Noah had basically said is, you know, for 400 years, Black people have done their part, but haven't reaped the rewards from it. They've built up this society in many ways, but have not been the beneficiaries of it. And so therefore, if you know, who's breaking the contract here? Is it, you know, or the contract already was broken? So that's one reason why the people might feel like they have the right to go into Target and do what they do. Just a point of view, but I thought it was interesting that there was at least an attempt to justify what they were doing. And so, point being, we can't nicely say, oh, you guys don't, you know, we really need to change things, don't you think? I mean, toes are going to have to be stepped on sometimes with this activism thing.
Yeah, I agree with that. Like, I think a really good example of that is like how the footballers were kneeling during the national anthem. I think it was a year or two ago, and they got a really big backlash about it. I think the guy actually left the San Francisco 49ers because he was just being harassed so much. And like that was the beginning of this movement. And they tried to do it peacefully, they tried to do it respectfully, but it falls on deaf ears. So I think there is kind of a certain amount of, yeah, we kind of have to wake people up and scream in their ears for them to hear this.
Yeah. Unfortunately, in the case that Kevin's talking about, it may be the same people sleeping during the day who would benefit from the change that are having their lives disrupted, rather than the people, I guess, more in the normal schedule and the normal cultural. Yeah. Well, let's see if we can get to this one last question here. So the individuals in the film used many different skills and aspects of their personalities in their actions. What skills and talents do you have that might contribute to a cause you believe in? Any thoughts on that?
Time now. Now that we've got this COVID thing and we got to stay at home, now there's time to get up.
Yeah. And what cause are you thinking about contributing your time to?
Well, for me, I've
Jennifer?
been doing a lot of the text banking and postcard writing and webinar watching. Some Palestinian stuff, Donna, definitely, because that's a total passion of mine. So like, I used to read. I remember I used to read books, and now I find I don't have enough time to do the things that I used to do when I was a working person. It's just kind of weird, but I just feel like I have to do something. And I'm an older person, so you know, I don't know how much longer I'll have to be on this earth to make a difference. But just an aside, I've asked my grandson if he would please. Cartoon would be the, you know, that cute little Chicken Little from the movie. And Chicken Little, of course, is saying, "Oh, the sky is falling and it's terrible and how awful it is." And so I'm Chicken Little with that beautiful, you know, big yellow head. But I have a Man of La Mancha helmet on, and I have a Man of La Mancha spike or lance, whatever it is. And there's windmills in the background. And so I'm saying, this is horrible. This is just terrible. The world, oh my God. And yet I cannot quit with the tilting at windmills. So I can't figure out whether I'm an optimistic pessimist or a pessimistic optimist. Not sure. All I know is I can't not tilt at those windmills. It's got to do it.
What other skills do people have in this group?
I think leadership is probably a big one. Just like having the courage to actually speak out. And it doesn't, like, obviously it doesn't have to be, I don't think it has to be, you know, leading a march down the Seattle Central. Like, it can be, you know, standing up to your family and being like, hey, like, it's not cool to say that anymore. It's like those small things of like taking those moments and being like holding people accountable, I guess, I think is a good skill to have as an activist for sure.
I'm finding with COVID that I'm having to learn a whole bunch of new skills to do virtual activism.
Oh,
You're doing very well.
I think this Zoom thing is going to make a difference in our society as well. Because it sure has made it easy. I mean, like, for instance, with the Meaningful Movies, theoretically, we could have had somebody from South Korea and Germany or whatever on this call with us right now.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas before, when we were just going to the Magic Lantern Theater downtown, you know, I mean, you had to go down there and park and, you know, and if you weren't available that night to do all that, whereas we can invite anybody from anywhere to come and be part of us. I think that's pretty cool. And will people will they have to have meetings in Chicago that people fly to? Well, no, they won't have to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So it can have a positive effect on climate change and everything. I think Zoom is here to stay. I really do.
Yeah, I think creativity is a really important skill for us, at least at Sustainable Ballard, because we do a lot of work to try and make learning about sustainability fun. So now I'm trying to learn some new online skills to like gamify, like have trivia quizzes or do art contests online to encourage people to get active or get engaged with the issues that we're talking about now. Which it's really fun to do that, but also, like I said, it gets people engaged, I think, in a different way than just let's have a workshop or meeting.
Jenny.
Yeah.
Kevin here.
Hey, Kevin.
I was thinking about your, when there were alternatives to that protest with two other places they could do it on the same road. And you said, well, maybe the people that were trying to sleep would help them or something to understand. I guess my thought on a skill I have is thinking hard about things. And I came up with the example of, let's say the Ballard Parade, you know, the Sustainable Organization's annual festival or street festivals, that kind of thing. If it gets usurped by a Seahawk rally, and there's hundreds of thousands of people who want to march in that same space during your time, I'm sure you wouldn't feel too good about it and say, well, more the merrier. I guess they outnumber us or their cause is better. I mean, that's what I'm trying to think. I was kind of surprised by that analysis you made there.
Oh, what I was saying, Kevin, was that the people who were being disrupted were probably also the people who would benefit. So it's sort of counterproductive to protest to the people who are, instead of doing it in a place where it's the people who sleep at night who are disrupted. I guess I didn't make that point very clear, but I'm trying to clarify that
I
it
think
seems
I'm
like
getting
it
more
was,
what you were trying to
it
say,
was,
but
it's
having
sort of
done that before, it is.
the wrong place to create the disruption is what I was trying to say, because you're
Okay.
probably disrupting the people who are already disrupted in their lives by having to sleep during the day.
True enough. Been there, done that.
Okay, looks like we're right here at the 7:29. So we're gonna have to wrap up the discussion. Thanks so much, Eric and Marga,
Thank you.
for joining us. I wanted to just go around real quickly and have everybody just give us a 2-word closing. Let's start with Max.
Put me on the spot. Thankful, I guess, is one of mine.
You can have 1 word, 1 or 2 words. How about that?
That's great. Thank you.
Inspiring.
Thank you.
How about,
Safe.
what was that?
Stay safe.
Stay safe.
Can the film people say something?
Yes, please.
Great group. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, great conversation. Learned a lot.
Likewise.
Kevin?
Yeah, mine is, I don't hear any Boston accent from you two.
What do you mean? we're Bostonians, right, Derek? From top to bottom.
I'm from Minnesota originally,
Oh, there you go.
and Marga's from even farther.
Imports.
All right, my 2-word closing is take action.
Good one.
So
Thank you.
thank you all for joining.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
Thank
thank
you,
you.
everyone.
Have a
Really
good night.